The gavel came down like a gunshot. Motion granted. All assets awarded to the plaintiff. I sat there in the courtroom, numb, watching my wife, my ex-wife, smile at her lawyer. Not just any lawyer. Her boyfriend. The man she'd been sleeping with for God knows how long while I was building our life, working 60-hour weeks, thinking I was securing our future. Judge Morrison didn't even look at me as he read the decision, just rattled off the list like he was reading a grocery receipt. The business known as Anderson Construction, valued at $2.1 million, is awarded to Mrs. Anderson. My business. 15 years of sweat and calluses and missed sleep. 15 years of building something from nothing, starting with just me and a used truck, growing it into a company with 23 employees and contracts all over the state. I'd built houses, renovated historic buildings, constructed community centers. My work was everywhere in this city, permanent and solid, proof that I'd existed and mattered, and with one sentence, it was hers. The marital home at 4750 Oakwood Drive, valued at $1.4 million, is awarded to Mrs. Anderson. The house I'd renovated myself, every room, every fixture. I'd torn out walls with my own hands, refinished the hardwood floors on my knees, replumbed the entire second story. I'd installed the kitchen cabinets Jennifer picked out, even though I thought they were too expensive. I'd built the deck where we'd had our first anniversary dinner. I'd painted our bedroom the exact shade of blue she wanted, repainting it 3 times because she kept changing her mind. Every nail, every board, every tile, I'd chosen it, installed it, made it perfect for her. And now it was just hers. The 2019 Ford F-350, valued at $68,000, is awarded to Mrs. Anderson. My truck, my tools were in that truck. The nail guns, the saws, the levels that had been my father's before he died. Tools I'd used for 25 years since I was a teenager working construction summers to pay for college. The truck itself had been a gift to myself 3 years ago, after we landed the biggest contract in company history. I'd taken Jennifer to dinner to celebrate, and she'd rolled her eyes when I'd said I wanted to spend some of the profit on a new work truck. Before we get into it, don't forget to like and subscribe, and hit hype to boost this episode. Drop a comment below with your city or country. I'm always curious where viewers are joining from. You and your toys, she'd said. It wasn't a toy, it was my livelihood, my office, my partner. And she was taking it. All joint accounts totaling $640,000 are awarded to Mrs. Anderson. Everything. He gave her everything. I'd saved that money over years. Careful, slow, putting away a little from each job, building a safety net, planning for retirement, for our future, for the kids we'd talked about having someday. Money I'd earned with my hands, my back, my time. Gone. Furthermore, Judge Morrison continued, not even pausing, Mr. Anderson is ordered to pay spousal support in the amount of $5,000 per month for a period of 5 years, retroactive to the date of separation. The total amount owed is currently $65,000, due within 60 days. My stomach dropped. I didn't have $65,000. I didn't have $5,000. I had maybe $300 in my wallet because everything else had been in the accounts he'd just awarded to Jennifer. Your Honor, my public defender started. Mr. Anderson, the judge interrupted, finally looking at me. His eyes were cold. You have been abusive, controlling, and financially manipulative toward your wife for the duration of your marriage. The evidence presented shows a clear pattern of coercive behavior and emotional abuse. Mrs. Anderson has been forced to rebuild her life after years of mistreatment. The assets awarded barely compensate for the suffering you've caused. Abusive? Controlling? I'd never raised my hand to Jennifer. Never raised my voice. I'd worked myself to exhaustion to give her everything she wanted. The evidence also shows you deliberately hid business assets and attempted to defraud Mrs. Anderson of her rightful share of the marital estate. That's not true, I said. I showed them everything, every account, every... Mr. Anderson, the judge's voice cracked like a whip. You will not speak out of turn in my courtroom. You have been given generous terms considering the severity of your behavior. Be grateful you're not facing criminal charges for domestic abuse and financial fraud. This hearing is adjourned. The gavel came down again. I sat there, unable to move, unable to breathe. My public defender, a tired-looking woman named Sarah, who'd met me 20 minutes before the hearing and spent 15 of those minutes on her phone, gathered her papers. I'm sorry, she whispered. Sometimes judges they make up their minds before the hearing even starts. You could appeal, but that would cost money you don't have. This isn't right, I said. I never abused her. I never hid anything. She's lying. I believe you, Sarah said, though her tone suggested she didn't. But it doesn't matter what I believe. It matters what the judge believes, and he believed her. She left. I sat there as everyone filed out. Court officers, other lawyers, people waiting for their own hearings. They all stared at me. The abusive husband, the financial criminal, the man who'd tormented his poor wife for years. Jennifer was still there, near the door, talking with her lawyer. With Marcus. I'd met him once, months ago, at a charity event Jennifer had dragged me to. He'd seemed nice enough, smooth, successful, the kind of man who wore expensive cologne and had perfectly white teeth. I hadn't known then that he was sleeping with my wife. I hadn't known then that he was planning to destroy me. Jennifer turned and saw me still sitting there. She whispered something to Marcus. He nodded, squeezed her shoulder, and walked out. She approached me slowly, her heels clicking on the marble floor. She was wearing a black dress, conservative and expensive. The diamond earrings I'd bought her for our 10th anniversary caught the light. She told me they were too much, that I shouldn't have spent so much money, that she'd love anything I gave her. She'd been wearing them every day since I'd moved out. "Derek," she said softly, standing a few feet away. I looked up at her. This woman I'd loved. This woman I'd married. This woman I'd built a life with. "I know you're angry," she continued, "but this is for the best. You'll see that eventually. We weren't good together. We weren't healthy." "I loved you," I said. "No, you didn't. You loved the idea of me. You loved having someone to take care of, someone to control, but you never really saw me as a person, Derek. You saw me as property." "That's not true." "It is, but I'm free now, and eventually you'll be free too. You'll find someone else, someone better suited for you, someone who can tolerate your issues." She said it kindly, like she was doing me a favor, like she was a saint forgiving the man who'd wronged her. "Jennifer, I gave you everything. You gave me what you wanted to give me. You never asked what I actually wanted. You wanted the house. I renovated it exactly how you asked. I wanted a partner, Derek. Not a handyman, not someone who worked all the time and expected me to be grateful for it. I was building a life for us. You were building a life for yourself. I was just supposed to be a part of it." She sighed. "This is pointless. You'll never understand. Just try to move on, okay? Try to be better for the next person." She started to walk away, then stopped and looked back. "Oh, and Derek, you have 30 days to get your stuff out of the house. After that, I'm changing the locks. And if you're even one day late on that spousal support, Marcus will have you arrested. He's very good at what he does." She smiled. Not cruel, not mocking, just satisfied. "Enjoy poverty, old man." Then she was gone, and I was alone in the empty courtroom, 49 years old, with nothing. I sat there for another 20 minutes before a court officer came and told me they were closing the building. I stood up slowly, my legs stiff, my whole body feeling like it belonged to someone else. Outside, the sun was shining. People were walking past, living their normal lives, going to lunch, talking on phones, laughing. The world was exactly the same as it had been 3 hours ago. But my world had ended. I walked to the parking lot. My car, the old Honda Civic I'd kept for running errands, the one Jennifer had always hated because it was embarrassing, was parked in the far corner. I'd driven it to court because my truck was already gone. Jennifer had taken it the day I'd moved out, said she needed it more than I did. I sat in the driver's seat and looked at the courthouse building. Solid. Permanent. Official. The place where they'd decided I was an abuser, a fraud, a man who deserved nothing. I started the car and drove away, not sure where I was going, not sure what I was supposed to do next. I just drove. The first night, I slept in my car. Not the truck. That was hers now, apparently. My old Honda Civic with 200,000 miles on it, the one I'd kept meaning to sell but never got around to. I parked in a Walmart lot on the edge of town. I'd read somewhere online that Walmarts let people sleep in their parking lots overnight. I didn't know if it was true, but no one bothered me that first night. I couldn't sleep anyway. I lay across the back seat. I'm 6'2", and my legs didn't fit, so I had to curl up like a child, and stared at the ceiling fabric, watching the lights from passing cars sweep across it. I kept thinking about how we'd gotten here. Jennifer and I had been married for 12 years. We'd met at a charity event I'd been forced to attend. One of those networking things where contractors mingle with potential clients. She was a real estate agent, young and ambitious, with a smile that lit up the room. She'd approached me at the bar, started talking about properties, about renovations, about vision and potential. "You see the bones of things," she'd said. "Most people just see what's there. You see what could be." I'd fallen hard. Within 3 months, we were engaged. 6 months after that, married. Everyone said we were rushing, but I didn't care. Jennifer made me feel seen in a way I'd never felt before. She believed in me. She pushed me to grow the business, take on bigger projects, think beyond just being a contractor. You could build an empire, she'd say. You're wasting your potential. So I grew the business. I hired more workers. I took out loans to buy better equipment. I bid on bigger contracts. And it worked. Within 5 years, Anderson Construction was one of the most successful firms in the region. Jennifer loved the success. She loved the money, the status, the invitations to exclusive events. She loved telling people her husband was a successful businessman, not just some blue-collar contractor. But somewhere along the way, I stopped being enough. It was subtle at first. Little comments about how I should dress better, speak differently, spend less time at job sites, and more time in the office. She'd criticized the way I talked to clients, said I was too casual, that I needed to present myself professionally. You're an executive now, Derek. Act like it. But I wasn't an executive. I was a carpenter who'd built a business. I liked being on job sites, working with my hands, solving problems in real time. That's who I was. That's who she'd started to despise. The fights became more frequent. She wanted a bigger house, luxury vacations, a lifestyle I wasn't sure we could sustain. I tried to explain that we needed to be careful, that construction was cyclical, that we should save for slower periods. You're just scared, she'd snap. Scared to actually be successful. Scared to be something more than your father was. That one hurt. My dad had been a contractor too, a good one, who'd worked until the day he died of a heart attack at 62 on a job site. He'd taught me everything, and I'd been proud to follow in his footsteps. But Jennifer saw it as failure, as limitation, as something to escape. 6 months ago, she'd asked for a divorce. We'd been fighting about money again. She wanted to buy a vacation home in Florida, and I'd said we couldn't afford it right now. She'd exploded, screaming that I was holding her back, that she was tired of living beneath her potential, that she deserved better. I want a divorce, she'd said coldly. I'd been devastated. I'd begged her to reconsider, to try counseling. She'd agreed, but only went to 2 sessions before quitting. There's nothing to work on, she'd said. I don't love you anymore. I'm not sure I ever did. That should have prepared me for what came next, but somehow I'd still believed we'd split things fairly. I'd even offered her the house, thinking it would help her move on, help her start fresh. I'd been such a fool. The divorce proceedings had been brutal. Jennifer's lawyer, Marcus, had portrayed me as an abusive, controlling tyrant who'd financially manipulated her for years. They'd produced witnesses I'd never met who testified I'd been verbally abusive. They'd shown financial documents that made it look like I'd been hiding money. My public defender had barely fought back. She'd seemed overwhelmed, unprepared, already defeated before we'd started. And now here I was, curled up in my car in a Walmart parking lot. My entire life reduced to 3 garbage bags of clothes and a sleeping bag. The next morning, a security guard knocked on my window. Hey, you can't sleep here, buddy. Move along. It was 5:47 a.m. I'd finally fallen asleep around 4. Sorry, I muttered. I'm going. This isn't a campground. You want to sleep in your car? Find somewhere else. I drove away with nowhere to go. I couldn't go to the house. That was Jennifer's now. I couldn't go to the office. The business was Jennifer's now. I had friends, or I thought I did, but at 5 in the morning, I wasn't ready to face their pity or their questions. I drove to a truck stop off the highway. The sign said showers were $12. I paid with cash and stood under the hot water for 30 minutes, trying to wash away the shame and confusion and rage. When I got out, I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked older than 49, tired, defeated, the face of a man who'd lost everything. I checked my bank account on my phone. $340, $18. That was it. Everything I had in the world. I thought about calling my sister, Marie. We'd always been close growing up. She lived 2 states away now, had a family of her own, but she'd always said I could count on her. I called. It rang 4 times, then went to voicemail. Hey, Marie, it's Derek. I need to talk to you. Something's happened. Can you call me back? I waited. An hour passed. Nothing. I called again. Straight to voicemail this time. I texted, Marie, please, I really need to talk to you. Nothing. I tried again that afternoon, and that evening, and the next day. She never responded. Later, much later, I'd learned that Jennifer had gotten to her first, had called her weeks before the divorce, crying, claiming I'd been abusive, that she was scared, that she needed support. Marie had believed her, had blocked my number to support Jennifer's healing. My own sister had chosen Jennifer's lie over my truth without even asking me. I tried my best friend, Tony. We'd known each other since high school. He'd been my best man at the wedding. We'd watched football together every Sunday for 20 years. If anyone would help me, it would be Tony. He answered on the 3rd ring. Derek. His voice was cold. Tony, thank God. Listen, I need help. The divorce, it went completely wrong. Jennifer took everything, and I can't talk to you, man. What? Why? Look, Jennifer told us some things about how you treated her, about the drinking problem, about the controlling behavior. I can't be involved in this. A drinking problem? Tony, I don't drink. You know that. We've been friends for 30 years. You know I don't drink. People change, Derek. And honestly, looking back, I can see the signs. The way you always had to be in control. The way you isolated Jennifer from her friends. The way you obsessed over work. I didn't isolate her. I worked hard to build a life for us. That's what abusers always say. His voice was filled with disgust. I've got a daughter, Derek. I can't have someone like you in my life. Don't call me again. He hung up. I sat in my car in the truck stop parking lot and tried to understand what had just happened. How had Jennifer convinced everyone I was a monster? What lies had she told? And why had everyone believed her without even talking to me? Over the next week, I discovered the full extent of her campaign against me. She'd contacted every mutual friend we had, told them I'd been abusive for years, that she'd hidden it out of shame, that she was finally free. She'd cried on their shoulders. She'd shown them carefully selected text messages where I'd said things that, out of context, looked controlling. She'd created a narrative where she was the victim and I was the villain, and everyone had believed it. One by one, they all cut me off. Friends I'd known for decades, couples we'd socialized with. Even my employees, Jennifer had called them too, warning them that I was unstable and potentially dangerous. By the end of that first week, I was completely alone. No family, no friends, no job, no home, just me and my car and $226 left in my account, after paying for food and gas and truck stop showers. I parked at different places each night, trying to avoid security guards and police, Walmart parking lots, rest stops, residential streets where I hoped I'd blend in. Each night, I'd curl up in that back seat, trying to get comfortable, trying to sleep, trying not to think about how my entire life had disintegrated in less than a month. And every night, I'd think about ending it. It would be easy. Drive to a bridge, take pills, just stop fighting. No one would miss me. No one would care. Jennifer had made sure of that. On the 14th day of living in my car, I sat at a rest stop picnic table and made a plan. There was a bridge about 30 miles away. High enough, quick enough, I could be done by sunset. I sat there for 4 hours, working up the courage, saying goodbye to a life that had already said goodbye to me. Then my phone buzzed. Low battery warning. I'd forgotten to charge it at the library yesterday. I almost let it die. What did it matter? But something made me plug it into my car charger. Some stubborn refusal to let even that small thing go. That stubbornness saved my life. Because 3 days later, the letter arrived. I'd been living in my car for 17 days when I went to check my P.O. box. I'd set up the box a month before the divorce, back when I still had hope that things might work out, that I might find a small apartment somewhere and need an address for mail. It cost $15 a month, which now seemed like an absurd luxury, but I'd prepaid for 3 months. The box was usually empty. Just bills I couldn't pay, collection notices, credit card offers that mocked me with promises of financial freedom. But that day, Thursday, October 12th at 3:47 p.m., I remember the exact time because my phone died the moment I pulled up to the post office. There was a single envelope inside, plain white, official looking. Return address stamped Jackson County Tax Assessor's Office, Alaska. Alaska. I'd never been to Alaska. Didn't know anyone there. For a moment, I thought it was a scam, one of those fake tax notices designed to steal your identity. I almost threw it away. But something stopped me. Maybe curiosity. Maybe the fact that throwing away mail felt like giving up one more small piece of normalcy. Maybe just the desperate hope that something, anything, might break differently than it had been breaking for weeks. I opened it standing right there at the post office box, using my keys to tear the envelope since it was sealed tight. Final notice, property tax overdue. Property description, 340 acres. Lot 47, Jackson County, Alaska parcel. Number AKJC00847-1-1998. Owner of record, Derek Michael Anderson, SSN, 4429, tax amount due. $4,040 due date. November 15th, 2024. Warning. If payment is not received by the due date, this property will be subject to tax lien sale as authorized by Alaska State Code Section 2945-300. The county may sell tax lien certificates to recover unpaid taxes. For questions or payment arrangements, contact Jackson County Tax Assessor's Office at 907-5555-0147. I read it once, twice, 3 times. 340 acres in Alaska. In my name. With my social security number. I didn't own property in Alaska. I'd never inherited anything from anyone. This had to be a mistake. Some clerical error. Maybe there was another Derek Anderson and they'd gotten the files mixed up. But the social security number was right. The middle name was right. I stood there in the post office, people moving around me to check their own boxes, and tried to make sense of this impossible letter. Then I remembered something. Uncle Robert, my father's younger brother. I'd barely known him. He'd been at family gatherings when I was a kid, but always on the periphery, quiet, awkward, never married. My dad had said Robert preferred solitude, that he'd moved to Alaska in the 70s to get away from people. I'd gone to his funeral in 1998. I'd been 23, just starting my first real construction job. The funeral had been small, maybe 10 people. I'd flown out to some tiny town in Alaska, sat through a brief service, shaken hands with people I didn't know, and flown back. That was it. Had Uncle Robert left me property? Was that possible? I looked at the letter again. Lot 47. Acquired 1998. The year he died. My hands started shaking. I walked out of the post office to my car, sat in the driver's seat, and stared at the letter. I needed to call them. I needed to find out if this was real. But my phone was dead, and I had no way to charge it until I could get to a library or a coffee shop with outlets. I checked my pockets. $47 in cash. I'd been rationing it carefully, eating once a day, usually dollar menu items or whatever was cheapest at gas stations. I drove to a McDonald's, bought a coffee I didn't want for $2.50 just so I could sit in a booth and use their outlet. I plugged in my phone and waited for it to charge enough to make a call. While I waited, I read the letter again and again, looking for some sign it was fake, but it looked legitimate. Official letterhead, phone number, everything seemed real. My phone finally powered on. 4% battery, good enough. I called the number with shaking hands. It rang twice. Jackson County Tax Assessor's Office. This is Linda speaking. Hi, I received a notice about property taxes. I think there might be a mistake. What's the parcel number? Her voice was friendly, professional, with a slight Alaskan accent. I read it off, stumbling over the numbers. I heard typing, then silence, long enough that I thought we'd been disconnected. Hello? I'm here, she said. Just pulling up the file. Okay, what's your name, sir? Derek Anderson. More typing, another pause. Can you verify your date of birth for me? I gave it to her. And the last 4 digits of your social security number? 4429. More silence. Then, Mr. Anderson, there's no mistake. You've owned this property since November 1998. It was transferred to you following the death of Robert James Anderson, who listed you as sole heir in his will. The McDonald's seemed to tilt. I gripped the edge of the table. I didn't know. No one told me. It appears your uncle had the tax bills sent to his own address initially, with automatic payments set up from his estate account. Those automatic payments continued until about 3 years ago, when the account was depleted. Since then, we've been sending notices to the last address we had on file, but they've all been returned as undeliverable. What is this property? Let me see. 340 acres of undeveloped land in the northeastern section of Jackson County. Remote area, no structures, mostly wilderness and natural terrain. My heart sank. So it was worthless. Just empty land I couldn't afford to pay taxes on. Another problem I didn't need. Mr. Anderson, are you still there? Yeah. Sir, I should tell you. You've had multiple inquiries about this property over the years. What kind of inquiries? From oil and gas companies. Quite a few, actually. They've been trying to locate the owner to negotiate mineral rights agreements. We're not permitted to give out owner information, but they've been persistent. Very persistent. The world stopped. Oil and gas companies, mineral rights. What does that mean exactly? Linda's voice became careful, professional. Mr. Anderson, I'm not qualified to advise you on this, but I can tell you that this area has been of significant interest to energy companies for the past several years. There have been geological surveys filed with the county, drilling permits applied for in adjacent properties. I really think you should contact these companies directly. Why would they want my land? I can't say for certain, but... She paused. Mr. Anderson, I've worked here for 18 years. In that time, I've seen a lot of property tax notices. A lot of properties go to lien sales because owners can't or won't pay the taxes. But in all those years, I've never seen as many inquiries about a single property as I've seen about yours. These companies have been calling every few months asking if the owner's been located. My mouth was dry. How many companies? At least 6 that I'm aware of. Probably more. Can you give me their contact information? I can give you the names and numbers of the ones who left information with us. Hold on. I heard papers shuffling. My phone was at 7% battery now, and I prayed it wouldn't die. Okay, she said. I have contact information for Petrocorp Energy, Northern Frontier Resources, and Alaska Horizons Petroleum. Those are the three that left the most recent inquiries. Would you like me to email you the details? I don't. My phone's dying. Can you just tell me? I'll write it down. She read off 3 names, 3 phone numbers, 3 email addresses. I wrote them on a napkin with a pen I'd borrowed from the counter, my handwriting barely legible because my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Mr. Anderson, Linda said after I'd confirmed I had all the information. I'm not supposed to say this, but call those companies, today if you can. And before you talk to any of them, consider getting a lawyer, a good one. I can't afford a lawyer. Trust me on this. After you make those calls, you'll be able to afford one. What are you saying? She was quiet for a moment. Then, I'm saying that property of yours is sitting on top of something valuable. Very valuable. The geological surveys that have been filed with this office show significant mineral deposits beneath your land. I'm not an expert, Mr. Anderson, but I've seen enough to know that when 6 different oil companies are fighting to find the owner of a piece of property, it's worth paying attention. How valuable? I can't tell you that. I don't know the specifics. But she lowered her voice slightly. My husband works in the industry. I mentioned your property to him once, just in passing, when I was frustrated about how many calls we were getting. He looked up the survey data. He said if the estimates are correct, we're talking about a major deposit. Major like what? Major like tens of millions of dollars, Mr. Anderson. Maybe more. The phone slipped from my hand. It clattered on the table, and I scrambled to pick it up. Sir, are you there? I'm here. Call those companies, today, and get a lawyer before you sign anything. Promise me. I promise. Good luck, Mr. Anderson. She hung up. I sat in that McDonald's booth for 2 hours, staring at the napkin with 3 phone numbers on it, trying to convince myself this was real. People came and went around me, families eating lunch, teenagers laughing at a corner table, an elderly couple sharing French fries, normal people living normal lives, and I was sitting there with 3 phone numbers that might change everything, or might be nothing. But I had to find out. My phone was at 23% now. I took a deep breath, picked up the napkin, and dialed the first number. I'd been living in my car for 17 days when I got the letter. I'd been using a P.O. box for mail, one of the last things I'd set up before losing everything. I checked it every few days, though I don't know why. It was just bills I couldn't pay, collection notices, reminders of my failure. But this envelope was different. Plain white, official looking. Return address, Jackson County Tax Assessor's Office, Alaska. Alaska? I'd never been to Alaska. Didn't know anyone there. I almost threw it away, figured it was a scam. But something made me open it. Final notice. Property tax overdue property. 340 acres. Lot 47, Jackson County, Alaska owner, Derek Michael Anderson and tax, due $4,840. If payment is not received within 30 days, property will be subject to tax lien sale. I read it 3 times. I didn't own property in Alaska. This had to be a mistake. Some kind of identity theft or clerical error. But the name was right. Derek Michael Anderson. My social security number was partially listed. The notice looked legitimate. I sat in my car in the Walmart parking lot, holding this letter, completely confused. Then I remembered something. My uncle, my dad's brother, Robert. He died when I was in my 20s, 1998, I think. I'd been at the funeral. I barely knew him. He'd been a recluse, lived alone somewhere remote. We'd never been close. But could he have left me property? I pulled out my phone. I had $180 left in my account, and my phone bill was overdue, but it still worked. I called the number on the letter. Jackson County Tax Assessor's Office. Hi, I received a notice about property taxes, but I think there's been a mistake. What's the property number? I read it off. I heard typing, then silence. Sir, what's your name? Derek Anderson. More typing. A long pause. Mr. Anderson, can you verify your date of birth and the last 4 digits of your social security number? I did. Another pause. Then the woman said, Mr. Anderson, there's no mistake. You've owned this property since 1998. It was transferred to you following the death of Robert Anderson. You're listed as the sole heir. My hands started shaking. I didn't know. It appears your uncle had the tax bill sent to his own address initially, with automatic payments set up from his estate. Those payments ran out 3 years ago. We've been trying to reach you, but the address we had on file was outdated. What is this property? 340 acres of undeveloped land in Jackson County, remote area, mostly wilderness. My heart sank. Worthless then. Just a tax burden I couldn't afford. Mr. Anderson, are you still there? Yeah, I'm here. Sir, I should tell you, you've had multiple inquiries about this property over the years. Inquiries? From oil and gas companies. They've been trying to reach the property owner to negotiate mineral rights leases. We're not allowed to give out owner information, but, sir, I think you should contact them. Everything stopped. The noise from the parking lot, the traffic, my own thoughts. Everything went silent except for her voice. What are you saying? I'm saying you should call these companies, Mr. Anderson. The mineral rights on that land, I'm not an expert, but I've seen the geological surveys they've filed. That land sits on top of a significant oil deposit. How significant? She paused, then quietly. Significant enough that I think you should get a lawyer before talking to anyone, a good one. I sat in my car for 3 hours, just staring at the letter. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to people like me. This was a movie plot, not real life. But the letter was real. The tax office was real. The woman had sounded genuine. I used the last of my phone's data to Google Jackson County, Alaska oil deposits. Articles popped up about recent discoveries, about major oil companies investing billions in the region, about it being one of the most promising sites in North America. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I called the tax office back. Same woman answered. I need those oil company contact numbers, I said. Hold on. She came back with 3 names and numbers, all major companies, names I recognized from gas stations and news reports. I sat there, staring at the numbers, terrified to call. What if they'd lost interest? What if the deposit was smaller than they'd thought? What if this was all a cruel joke? But I had nothing left to lose. I called the first number, got transferred 4 times before reaching someone who actually knew what I was talking about. Mr. Anderson, we've been trying to reach you for years. The enthusiasm in his voice was unsettling. Are you calling about the Jackson County property? Yes. Fantastic. When can you fly to Houston? We'd like to discuss a lease agreement immediately. I'm not sure I can afford. We'll cover all travel expenses, of course. First-class flight, hotel, everything. When works for you? I almost laughed. I was living in my car, and they were offering me first-class flights. Tomorrow, I said. I can fly tomorrow. Perfect. I'll have my assistant email you the details. Mr. Anderson, I think you're going to be very happy with our offer. After we hung up, I just sat there. Then I called the second company. Similar reaction. Then the third. They all wanted to meet. They all sounded desperate. This was real. This was actually real. The ticket arrived in my email within an hour. First class to Houston, departing the next morning at 10 a.m. Hotel confirmation at a downtown Marriott. A car service to pick me up. I looked down at my clothes. I'd been wearing the same jeans and t-shirt for 4 days. Everything I owned was in my car. 3 garbage bags of clothes, a sleeping bag, some books. I drove to a Goodwill and spent $30 on the nicest clothes I could find. Khakis that almost fit, a button-down shirt, a tie with a small stain I hoped wouldn't show. Dress shoes that pinched but looked professional. I slept in the airport parking lot that night, too afraid I'd oversleep if I stayed at Walmart. The flight the next morning felt surreal. The seat was huge, leather, with more legroom than my car. The flight attendant brought me coffee and a warm towel. I kept waiting for someone to tell me there'd been a mistake, that I was supposed to be in the back with everyone else. But no one said anything. I landed in Houston at 2 p.m. A driver was waiting with a sign with my name on it. He took me to the hotel, a massive glass tower downtown. My room was on the 23rd floor with a view of the whole city. I stood at the window and cried. Not from happiness, not yet. From the sheer insanity of it all. 3 days ago, I was sleeping in a Walmart parking lot. Now I was in a luxury hotel, looking down at a city, waiting to meet with oil executives about land I didn't even know I owned. The meeting was scheduled for 7 p.m. I showered for the first time in days, in a bathroom bigger than my car, put on my Goodwill clothes, and went downstairs. 3 executives met me in a private conference room. They wore suits that probably cost more than my entire life was currently worth. They smiled, shook my hand, offered me water, coffee, dinner. I just wanted them to get to the point. The lead executive, Marcus Holloway, according to his card, pulled out a map and spread it on the table. Mr. Anderson, your property is here. He pointed to a section highlighted in yellow. Our geological surveys indicate this area sits above one of the largest untapped oil reserves in North America. We've been trying to access it for 5 years, but your land is the key piece. Without it, we can't efficiently extract from the surrounding fields. What are you offering? He smiled. Direct. I like that. Here's what we're proposing. $28 million up front for a 30-year mineral rights lease. You retain ownership of the land itself. Additionally, you'd receive royalties of 8% on every barrel extracted. Based on our projections, that's another $50 to $70 million over the next decade. I couldn't breathe. You're saying? We're saying this land could generate $80 to $100 million for you over the next 10 years. Possibly more if oil prices increase. The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the table. Mr. Anderson, are you all right? I need a minute. They left the room. I sat there alone, head between my knees, trying not to pass out. $100 million. I'd lost $4 million in the divorce and thought my life was over. And now these people were offering me $100 million. When they came back, I'd composed myself. I need to think about it, I said. I need to talk to a lawyer. Marcus nodded. Smart. We'd expect nothing less. We're not the only company interested in this property. You should hear all offers before deciding. But Mr. Anderson, I want you to know, we're serious. This isn't a negotiation tactic. That's our genuine offer. Why so much? Because without your land, we lose access to a multi-billion-dollar deposit. $28 million is a bargain from our perspective. We shook hands. They gave me their contact information and told me to call with any questions. Back in my hotel room, I stood at the window again, looking at the city lights, trying to process what had just happened. I called the second company. They offered $32 million up front. I called the third, $35 million. I sat on the bed and laughed until I cried. Before I left Houston, I flew to Alaska. I had to see this land myself, understand what I actually owned. Jackson County was remote, a 5-hour drive from Anchorage through mountains and wilderness that looked like something from a nature documentary. The scenery was breathtaking. Snow-capped peaks, pristine forests, eagles circling overhead. The town itself was barely a town, just a collection of buildings around a central street. Population sign said 847. There was a general store, a diner, a gas station, and the county office building. The county office was a small brick structure that looked like it had been there since the 1950s. Inside, it smelled like old paper and coffee. A woman in her 50s sat at the front desk. Can I help you? She asked, looking up. I'm Derek Anderson. I own some property here. I called about the tax notice. Her eyes widened. Mr. Anderson, Linda told me you might be coming. I'm Barbara. I've got to tell you, your property has been the subject of more interest than anything I've ever seen in this office. She disappeared into a back room and returned with a cardboard box, dusty and taped shut. Your uncle left this. It's been in storage since 1998. We're required to keep property owner documents for 75 years. When you didn't claim the land, we just held on to everything. My hands were shaking as I took the box. Can I? Is there somewhere I can sit and go through this? Of course. Use the conference room. She pointed to a door. Take your time. Inside were property deeds, neatly organized in folders. Tax records going back to 1972, geological surveys from the early 80s, and at the bottom, wrapped in a protective plastic sleeve, a sealed envelope with my name on it. I tore it open carefully. Inside were 3 sheets of paper covered in shaky handwriting. Dated August 18th, 1998, a week before my uncle had died. Derek, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you finally learned about the land. I'm sorry it took so long. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you in person, but by the time you find this letter, you'll understand why I had to do it this way. I was never good at relationships, at family. Your father and I barely spoke, but I kept track of you from a distance. I came to your wedding. I saw you marry Jennifer. I saw how you looked at her like she was everything, and I saw how she looked at you. Derek, I've lived alone for 40 years. I've become very good at observing people. I saw what Jennifer was the moment I watched her at that wedding. I saw how she calculated, how she performed. She didn't love you. She loved what you represented. I met her once at your father's funeral. She asked me questions about the family, about assets. At one point, she asked if your father had left you any inheritance. I lied and told her no. Her disappointment told me everything. I hired a private investigator, found out Jennifer had been married before. At 23, that marriage ended with her husband financially ruined. He died by suicide 3 years later. I knew she would eventually do to you what she'd done to him, so I made arrangements. This land, 340 acres, I bought them in 1972 for almost nothing. I had it surveyed in 1981. Oil. A lot of it. A massive deposit. I could have sold the rights then and become a millionaire, but I didn't. I kept the land quiet. I waited. I waited because I knew someday you'd need this more than I ever would. By the time you find this letter, your marriage will be over. She'll have taken your business, your home, everything. She'll have convinced everyone you were the villain. She'll have left you with nothing. But this land, Derek, these mineral rights, they're yours. I set it up so the taxes would be paid automatically for years, so you wouldn't know the land existed until the payments ran out. I did this because I know Jennifer. If you'd known about this land during your marriage, you would have told her. You're honest to a fault. You believe in partnership, and she would have found a way to take it. So I hid it, made sure the county would find you only after she'd already taken what she could take. The oil companies have been waiting for years. The most recent estimate suggests there's enough oil under your land to generate between $80 million and $150 million over 30 years. Maybe more if prices go up. Call those companies, hire a lawyer, negotiate the best deal you can. And then, when you're rich again, when you're richer than you ever imagined, remember this. Jennifer chose to leave you when she thought you had nothing. She kicked you when you were down. She doesn't get to come back when she learns you have everything. Don't let her. Don't forgive her. Don't give her a second chance. Find someone better. Live a better life. Be happy in a way that doesn't include her. I wish I could be there to see you win. But I'm old and tired, and I can feel my heart giving out. This is the last thing I can do for you. Leave you this gift, this proof that someone believed you were worth saving. You are, Derek. You're worth so much more than she ever saw. Now go show the world. Your uncle, Robert P.S. In 1985, I bought shares in Microsoft. $50,000 invested on a whim. Those shares are now worth approximately $4.2 million. They're in a brokerage account in your name. The account information is in the folder labeled Investments. Consider it your starting capital. I sat in that conference room and cried. Loud, gasping sobs that made Barbara knock on the door. I'm fine, I managed to say. Thank you. My uncle, a man I barely knew, who'd lived alone and died alone, had spent 20 years preparing for my salvation. He'd seen what I couldn't see. He'd known what I refused to believe. He'd saved me. From beyond the grave, across decades and distance, he'd saved me. I'd never even thanked him properly. I'd gone to his funeral and left. I hadn't understood who he was or what he'd done for me, but I understood now, and I would make sure his gift wasn't wasted. I flew back to Houston and did what my uncle advised. I made them compete. Over the next 2 weeks, I negotiated with all 3 companies, playing them against each other, pushing for better terms. I hired a lawyer, a real one this time, one who specialized in mineral rights and oil leases. She cost $800 an hour and was worth every penny. The final offer came from the second company, $42 million up front, 10% royalties, and a clause that gave me additional bonuses if oil prices exceeded certain thresholds. Total projected value over 30 years, $150 million. I signed the contract on a Thursday afternoon in a conference room in downtown Houston. When the wire transfer hit my account an hour later, $42 million, I just stared at my phone screen, watching the numbers, making sure they were real. They were real. I was rich. Not just comfortable. Rich. Generationally wealthy. And Jennifer had no idea. I didn't rush. That was the key. I stayed patient. I used a tiny fraction of my new wealth, $200,000, to hire a team of investigators and lawyers, the best money could buy. I want you to examine my divorce, I told them. Every document, every proceeding, every decision. Find the fraud. It took them 3 weeks. What they found was worse than I'd imagined. Jennifer's boyfriend lawyer, Marcus, had committed dozens of ethical violations. He'd presented falsified financial documents to the court, showing my business was worth far less than it actually was. He'd hidden assets that should have been split. He'd submitted affidavits from witnesses who'd later admitted Jennifer paid them to lie. But the real bombshell was the judge. Judge Morrison's clerk, a woman named Stephanie Reed, had been sleeping with Marcus. He'd given her gifts, expensive gifts, in exchange for favorable rulings. My lawyers had bank records, text messages, hotel receipts. The whole divorce had been rigged from the start. My lawyers filed a motion to vacate the divorce judgment. Then they filed bar complaints against Marcus. Then they filed criminal charges against both Marcus and Stephanie for fraud and corruption. And then, just to be thorough, they filed a civil lawsuit against Jennifer for fraud, perjury, and conspiracy. The lawsuit claimed damages of $10 million, not because I needed the money, but because I wanted her to understand what she'd done. The hearing to vacate the divorce was scheduled for 6 weeks later. Different judge this time. Judge Morrison had recused himself when the investigation started. I walked into that courtroom wearing a $5,000 suit, custom-tailored, Italian leather shoes, a watch that cost more than my old truck. Jennifer was already there with a new lawyer. Marcus had been disbarred 2 weeks earlier and was facing criminal charges. She looked tired, stressed. She'd lost weight. When she saw me, her eyes widened. She barely recognized me. The hearing took 3 hours. My lawyers presented evidence piece by piece. The falsified financial documents, the paid witnesses, the affair between Marcus and Stephanie, the judge's clerk admitting to accepting bribes. Jennifer's lawyer tried to object, tried to claim she'd been deceived by Marcus, that she hadn't known about the fraud. My lawyers played a recording of Jennifer and Marcus discussing their strategy, discussing how to hide my business assets, discussing how much they'd split after the divorce. She'd known everything. Judge Patricia Hart looked disgusted. "I've been on the bench for 20 years, she said. "I have never seen such blatant corruption and fraud. Mrs. Anderson, you and your former attorney attempted to steal everything from your husband through lies and manipulation. This court will not stand for it." She banged the gavel. "The divorce judgment is hereby vacated. All assets will be returned to their rightful owners. Mrs. Anderson, you have 30 days to return the business, the house, the vehicle, and all funds to Mr. Anderson. Additionally, I'm referring this case to the district attorney for criminal prosecution." Jennifer stood up. "Your Honor, that's not fair. I can't return everything. The business has debts, the house has a mortgage, You should have thought of that before you committed fraud, Mrs. Anderson. 30 days. Dismissed." Jennifer looked at me as they led her out. Not with anger, with confusion. She still didn't understand where the money for my lawyers had come from, how I'd gone from living in my car to wearing suits that cost more than her monthly salary. I didn't explain, I just smiled, and walked out. The media picked up the story. Local woman indicted for divorce fraud. It made the regional news, then the state news, then went viral online. Jennifer's face was everywhere. Her real estate license was revoked. The firm she worked for fired her immediately. Her friends, the same ones who'd abandoned me based on her lies, wanted nothing to do with her now. Marcus went to prison. 3 years for fraud and corruption. Stephanie, the judge's clerk, got 2 years and lost her job. Jennifer faced charges of perjury, fraud, and conspiracy. Her trial was scheduled for 4 months later. But before the trial, something else happened. One of my lawyers found evidence that Jennifer had been doing this before, not to the same extent, but she'd done it. She'd been married once before me, at 23. That husband had lost everything in their divorce under suspicious circumstances. He died 5 years later, suicide, according to the death certificate. My lawyers tracked down his family. They'd always suspected Jennifer had destroyed him, but they'd never had proof. Now they did. They filed a wrongful death lawsuit on behalf of his estate. Jennifer's legal troubles were mounting. Criminal charges, civil lawsuits, the return of assets she no longer had. She was drowning. And I watched from a distance, saying nothing, doing nothing, just waiting. The business came back first, though calling it back was generous. It had been run into the ground. Jennifer knew nothing about construction, had hired incompetent managers who knew even less, had lost major contracts through incompetence and broken promises. Half my employees had quit. The other half had been laid off when projects dried up. Equipment had been sold to cover debts. The reputation I'd spent 15 years building had been destroyed in 6 months. But it was mine again, legally speaking. The building, the name, the remaining assets. I spent $500,000 of the Microsoft money rebuilding it. New equipment, better equipment. I rehired the loyal employees who'd been fired, the ones who'd never believed Jennifer's lies, who'd quietly waited for me to come back. I landed new contracts, easy ones at first, then bigger ones as word spread that Anderson Construction was under proper management again. Within 6 months, it was thriving. Within a year, it was more successful than it had ever been. The house came next. Jennifer had taken out a second mortgage to fund her lifestyle. Expensive vacations, designer clothes, jewelry that now sat in evidence lockers somewhere. The bank was threatening foreclosure. She couldn't make the payments. I paid off the mortgage in cash. Showed up at the bank with a cashier's check for $840,000. Paid off every penny she owed and had the deed transferred back to my name. Then I changed every lock. Had the security codes reset, installed cameras, made sure she could never set foot in that house again. Part of me wanted to sell it, to erase every memory of her from my life. But another part of me wanted to keep it, to reclaim it, to prove that she hadn't won. That she hadn't taken everything, that I could take it all back. I kept it. The truck was totaled. She'd wrecked it drunk 6 weeks after the divorce. Drove it into a telephone pole at 2 a.m. Her boyfriend Marcus had been in the passenger seat. He'd broken 3 ribs. She'd walked away with barely a scratch, as people like her always seem to do. Insurance had paid out $52,000. That money had been spent long ago. I didn't care. I took the insurance settlement paperwork from the divorce records and bought something better. A brand new Ford F450, custom built, loaded with every feature imaginable. Cost me $120,000 and was worth every penny. The bank accounts were empty. Every cent Jennifer had taken from me, $640,000, was gone, spent on lawyers, on Marcus, on maintaining a lifestyle she couldn't actually afford. There was nothing to recover. I didn't need to recover it. I had more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. But Jennifer? Jennifer had nothing. Her lawyer Marcus had been disbarred after the criminal conviction. 3 years in federal prison for fraud and corruption. The legal community had turned on him completely. His fancy office had been shuttered, his assets seized, his reputation destroyed. Jennifer had stood by him at first, visiting him in prison, writing letters, talking about their future together. She'd posted photos on social media of her driving to the prison, captions about loyalty and true love and standing by your man. But money runs out. Reality sets in. Prison sentences are long and boring and unrewarding. 6 months into his sentence, Marcus sent her a letter breaking up with her. Said he needed to focus on himself, on his rehabilitation, on becoming a better person. The subtext was clear. He blamed her for his downfall. If he hadn't agreed to help her destroy me, he'd still have his career, his freedom, his life. She'd used him, and when everything collapsed, he'd been left holding the bag, just like she'd done to her first husband, just like she'd tried to do to me. Her real estate license was revoked. The state licensing board ruled that her participation in the divorce fraud made her unfit to handle other people's property and finances. She appealed. She lost. The firm she'd worked for fired her immediately, publicly distancing themselves from her crimes. They released a statement saying they were shocked and dismayed by her actions, that they had no knowledge of her fraudulent activities, that they were cooperating fully with authorities. She tried to get work at other agencies. No one would hire her. Her name was poisonous. One Google search, and potential employers saw the mugshot, the conviction, the details of what she'd done. She tried to leave the state, start fresh somewhere else. But the civil lawsuit followed her. My lawyers were relentless, pursuing her across state lines, filing liens, freezing accounts, making sure she couldn't escape the consequences. She'd stolen $4.2 million from me through fraud. The court ordered her to pay it all back, plus interest, plus legal fees. The total came to just over $6 million. She didn't have $6 million. She didn't have $6,000. She'd spent everything. Her condo, the one she'd bought after taking my house, was seized. Her car was repossessed. Her bank accounts were emptied. Even her jewelry, the pieces I'd given her over the years, was sold at auction to pay down the judgment. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. She declared bankruptcy. My lawyers objected, arguing that debts incurred through fraud couldn't be discharged. The bankruptcy judge agreed. The $6 million judgment would follow her for the rest of her life. She tried to get a regular job, retail, food service, anything, but the background checks always caught her. Convicted felon, fraud, theft. No one wanted to take the risk. I heard through mutual acquaintances, the few who'd eventually realized they'd been lied to and had sheepishly reached out to apologize, that Jennifer had moved back in with her mother in a trailer park 2 states away, that she was working under the table cleaning houses, that she'd gained weight, lost her looks, looked 10 years older than she was, that she'd become exactly what she'd called me, broke, old, nothing. The irony wasn't lost on me. I saw her once after she got out. It was 2 years later. I was driving through town in my new truck, a custom Ford F450 loaded with every feature worth $120,000. I stopped at a red light, and there she was, on the corner, sitting on a curb next to a shopping cart full of belongings. She was homeless. I don't know what had happened in those 2 years. Prison, probably. Inability to find work with a criminal record. Bridges burned, support gone, no one left to help her. She looked up as my truck rumbled at the light. Our eyes met. She recognized me immediately. Recognition turned to shock, then to something like horror as she realized what she was seeing. The expensive truck, my clothes, the watch on my wrist visible through the window. She started to stand up, started to walk toward the truck. The light turned green. I drove away. I didn't stop, didn't look back. She'd mocked me on those courthouse steps. Enjoy poverty, old man. Now she knew what poverty actually felt like. With my business back and thriving, with more money than I needed, I started thinking about what came next. My sister Marie called one day, apologetic, crying, begging for forgiveness. She'd believed Jennifer's lies, had cut me off when I needed her most. I forgave her. What else could I do? She was family. But I didn't forget. I helped her financially. She was struggling, behind on her mortgage. I paid it off. Not because I owed her anything, but because I could. Because that's what you do for family, even when they fail you. I reconnected with old friends. Most were apologetic, some weren't. They still believed I must have done something to deserve what Jennifer did. I cut those people loose. I started a foundation, a charity for people destroyed by divorce. Legal help, financial assistance, counseling. I funded it with $2 million and committed to adding more each year. Because I remembered what it felt like to have nothing, to sleep in my car, to be one day away from giving up. Not everyone gets a letter from a dead uncle. Not everyone gets saved. I flew back to Alaska one more time. Not for business. I had people managing that now. But to visit my uncle's grave. It was in a small cemetery outside Jackson County, overlooking the wilderness. A simple headstone, Robert Anderson, 1943, 1998. I stood there for a long time, trying to find words. Thank you seemed inadequate. You saved my life was true, but incomplete. Finally, I just said, you were right about everything. About Jennifer, about waiting, about being patient. You knew I'd survive this. You knew I was stronger than I thought. The wind blew through the trees. No response, of course. Just silence and sky and the kind of peace you only find in wild places. I'm going to live the life you wanted for me, I said. I'm going to be happy. I'm going to help people. And I'm never going to forget that you saw worth in me when I couldn't see it in myself. I left flowers. White roses. I don't know if he would have liked them. I barely knew him. But he'd known me. Somehow, across distance and time and death itself, he'd known exactly who I was and what I'd need. And he'd given it to me. 3 years after the letter arrived, I was a different man. Not just richer. Different. I'd learned that everything could be taken away in an instant. I'd learned that people you trust can betray you. I'd learned that the world can be cruel and unfair and deliberately, maliciously unjust. But I'd also learned that sometimes, when you're at your lowest, when you're sleeping in your car and considering ending it all, salvation comes from the most unexpected places. A letter about back taxes. A gift from a recluse uncle. A piece of land you never knew existed. I rebuilt my business bigger than before. I bought a new house, not the old one, despite getting it back. Too many bad memories. I bought something fresh. Something that was entirely mine. That Jennifer had never touched. I dated again. Carefully. Slowly. Trust didn't come easy anymore. But I was alive. I was free. I was okay. One day I drove past a Walmart. The same one where I'd slept in my car all those nights. I pulled into the lot and parked in the exact same spot I'd used back then. I sat there for a while, remembering what it felt like. The fear, the hopelessness, the absolute certainty that my life was over. Then I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. You survived, I said to myself. You fucking survived. And I had. Not just survived, thrived. Jennifer had tried to destroy me. She'd taken everything, mocked me, left me with nothing. But she'd missed one thing. One piece of land in Alaska that my uncle had hidden away, knowing someday I'd need it, and that one thing had changed everything.